Somebody asked me for help with how to draw razors, and I do get this question from time to time. So I figured I could record a video sort of showing how I do it and the way I like to break down and think about the different parts of this type of character. And despite the fact that their heads tend to be cubes, I actually always start with a circle for a head and draw the general pose that I'm going for. And out of all the objects that I've drawn, razors are typically the most like human torsos, so you can actually draw the pose almost however you want, and it could probably work with a razor just fine. When I draw razors, I can usually just start with this sort of simple stick figure. So it's a bunch of balls and sticks. Depending on the pose, the arms tend to usually be more human-like at first, and the legs are more obviously like an animal's. And then here you'll sort of see me starting on the head, so it's a cube, simple enough if you know how to draw a cube. Usually I'll start with the head and I'll make the angle. It sort of depends on where the character needs to look, though. If you're just doing a character drawing for fun, it doesn't really matter. So here I'm going to start on the neck, which is pretty much just made of a bunch of simple 3D shapes, just like the rest of the body is. So here we're going to draw Astra, because she's the easiest for me to draw off the top of my head. And as you can see at the top of Astra's body, over here it's usually made up of out of a bunch of triangles and diamonds. And I'm going to clean up the sketch a little bit so you can see sort of what I'm talking about here. So there it is. And I'll speed up some parts where I'm just like cleaning up the sketch. Now we'll have a clearer visual of her face. And here's where I'm going to start shaping out like the back of Razor. So I usually start with the neck and then I'll do the back and then I'll fill out all the shapes inside, so like then the stomach and everything. After I shape out, the rest of the torso. And I actually do tend to make the razors more human shaped, so you can usually see just by the silhouette where the neck is going to connect to the torso, and they have sort of a, you can see sort of where the hips would start if it was a person, just so they're not walking bricks. They have some, variation to like their silhouette and stuff. And it helps make them more anthropomorphic, as well as recognizable, distinct, and posable. And here I'm going to clean it up so I can get a better picture of where I want to put the lines inside of Razor's body, which is just like the stomach area that's usually has like a distinct shape around it. It's sort of like a peanut. And then she has the ridges on her side that a lot of shaving razors tend to have. Now I'm going to start on the arms. And when I draw a character's arms, the top arms as compared to the legs are usually more cartoonish because the characters usually I prefer them to be able to hold things, and I don't really like them to be overly detailed to the point where it looks kind of uncanny. Like if you put an extremely animal-like, set of arms on top of your character, it might not look right most of the time, at least in objectified, the context of like making a character for objectified. It's just you can go overboard with like how realistic it is, so I tend to dumb it down and I give them these, very very simple arms usually. And when I sketch parts like this, I don't usually need to make them this detailed, but just for the sake of showing you guys what's going through my head, I'm gonna sort of block out all the 3D shapes and how they connect, to the arms, so we get like the fingers here. And this is sort of where they bend and where the knuckles would be and like all that sort of stuff. So just so you can like get an idea of the way that I see it. And when you draw characters, even if they're cartoon characters, it's good to think of them in this sort of way. So like and have an idea of 3D space. It helps you draw characters with more depth so that they're not super flat, and it'll help you with your poses, and it'll help you later with perspective when you have to insert characters into scenes, which is going to be very important if you want to make art like your career. You need to be able to do stuff like that with like any kind of character. It doesn't matter what kind of character it is, even if you're just doing commissions, because then the pose of the character is like the central focus of the image usually, and you want it to look nice. So here I'm just going to finish up the arms and then we're going to move on to the legs and I'll show you what sort of shapes go into the legs for Astra, which you could probably apply to your own characters if you're trying to design, something similar. And if you haven't noticed, when I do arms and legs, I usually start with thinking about the spot where the arms and legs connect to the body, which usually has its own unique shape of fur. So Razor's is pretty simple, and then you have characters like Harry who have these gigantic spikes of fur, and Panna's kind of similar. And then you have characters like Stick who have the very round and fluffy shoulders and hips. So if you're designing your own Razor character, I would think about what kind of unique shapes you want the fur to be, and I would probably align it with, the way the character's body is sort of shaped if you can, just for consistency. So if your character has a lot of sharp edges, I'd make the fur spiky, and if your character is more round, the fur could probably just be rounder or smoother, or just be sort of the way Stick has his fur shaped. And this is just me blocking out the shapes of the legs to make them more distinct so you understand sort of how they're supposed to generally be shaped when I'm drawing a razor, and hopefully that idea of 3D space will help you apply that technique to like your own art, or at least you can envision it better. Or if you need to meticulously map out each individual shape that goes into the leg, this is sort of how you would do it. When I draw characters like Razor who have big claws, when I draw the feet, at least I try to actually like to start with the claws before I do like the shape of the toes. And then it kind of helps me do the toes more evenly around the shape of the claws, if that makes sense. But you'll see what I mean here in a second. And then I'm gonna clean it up here so you can sort of see how it turned out. It should be probably a lot more recognizable as what we're used to, right? I might make the fur thicker in some spots and change a few things, usually just like touch it up a little bit. Here I'm gonna start on like the inside of the head, so we're gonna do the faceplate and the razor blades, and then we'll do her face. And as you can see here, I'm using shift click, I think it is, which in most art programs, if you're on PC at least, it'll help you just do a straight line just with your mouse and a button. So you don't have to try to try it over and over again, press Control Z a million times. Which is a really good cheat for characters like this one. And the way it works in Paint Tool SAI specifically is like you click the spot you want the line to start, you hold shift, and then you can sort of see where the straight line is going to be when you move your mouse around, and then you can click again, and it makes the straight line. Here, as you can see, we're finishing up. I'm just gonna add her hair and like the tail, and then I'm gonna move on to drawing Astra in like a all fours pose, like a quadruped pose, so you can see how I draw that as well. And just like the last time, I'm going to start with the balls and sticks and the circle head, and then we'll start filling out the more detailed shapes, and then, same sort of deal. The idea is kind of the same, except now she's posed more like, an animal. And the nice thing about razors is that in real life you can move the part that holds the razor blade around, because it's supposed to do that. Which means when we're drawing these as characters, we can move their heads into different positions, which means they can be on all fours and they can still look up and look forward, which is really nice because you don't get that opportunity very often when you're drawing object show characters. Here, as you can see, I'm gonna get more of the head out of the way and then move on to the back and the neck and the torso. When she's on all fours, I usually actually start with the back plate instead of the neck sometimes. Just sort of depends. As you can see here, when we move characters into different positions like this, it is very important to have that idea of a sense of 3D space, because now we're taking the same shapes and we have to reimagine them stacked on top of each other at a different sort of perspective in a different sort of way, though they are generally the same. And this time we'll draw a razor with her accessory. So I'm going to draw the neckerchief and just sort of show you how it falls on her body, or like where I like to put it usually in this, you know, part where her neck connects to her chest. And here real quick, we'll slap on her arms and legs. So if you like animals and you like drawing animals, this will probably be way easier for you. But if you don't draw them and their arms and legs that often, it can be kind of a learning curve. Though I promise you the shapes are pretty simple, as you can see. They just bend a little differently than a human being's legs. And I'd argue they're really much more easy to draw once you get the hang of it. And of course, some characters have the same back legs as front legs and objectified. So if you were gonna draw like this foot, for example, with more distinct claws and shapes, it would kind of look something like this, which we don't do with Razor all the time. Usually only for action scenes where we want her to look more imposing. So we'll make her big claws more distinct. So here I'll finish up and I'll do the other details like the fur in the back of the head and the tail and the little whiskers. And there you go. She's done. I didn't bother drawing the face on this one, but just to show you that you can use like the same pose that you would for an animal, I'm just gonna draw like real quick, just like an animal here. So I'm gonna do a wolf, and as you can see, generally the same idea. It works. If it works with an animal or even a person, it probably works with a razor, which is very good because again, like I said, you can sort of do whatever you want. At least you have a lot of options. So here for this last part, we're going to design our own character from scratch using the same ideas. So we're going to take a picture off of Google of whatever eraser we think we like how they look, and then we're going to try to simplify them into like an objectified character and put the arms and the legs on them with like all of this stuff in mind. And sort of try to recreate this torso in a more cartoonish sort of way that we can redraw very easily many times in theory. So we're gonna make an OC. And when you're designing these characters, it's usually good to try to imagine them separated by what body parts you would imagine would be a part of the torso like this. So we're gonna start with sometimes these larger top sections of razors can both function as the neck and the chest if they're just a large connected piece. And beneath that we'll have the midsection, like where the rib cage would be, in the back, and then usually that third section at the bottom would be like the hip area, or just like the bottom of the torso. So definitely think about how you want to simplify these shapes in a way that are easy for you to draw, while it still sort of looks like what you're going for from just based off the reference image. You can change the details to make them simpler. You can add or change whatever kind of shapes you want. You can use multiple references and just sort of cherry pick what you like and apply it to the character that you're designing. So for example, as you can see here, I'll draw like 4 bumps as opposed to the reference image where there's like 100 of them. Just because more simple shapes fits the simple design of the character. This is how I would do it. And since our razor here has some very round shapes and not very sharp edges, we're going to make the fur shape also round. So this is going to be a fluffy razor. And of course, unless you want to add some kind of material stuck to the back of their head, because some people really don't like how razors look when they're, I guess, quote unquote bald, you can totally do that. I don't blame you. But other than that, I think that we're done designing this character, so that sort of, or at least the shape of them. I'm not gonna bother coloring them or anything. We're just sort of getting the idea of the shapes down, so to sort of help you out. I'm not gonna get into color theory or, or like coloring characters right now. But regardless, I hope this helped you if you've been struggling with like drawing razors and stuff, because they can be kind of difficult to draw if you like don't understand exactly how I do it, I guess, or you just don't draw that much. Hope you guys enjoyed. Bye.